Handwriting analysis, forgery, and counterfeiting are the topic of today's video. So document analysts examine and compare questioned documents with known material. Experts in the field investigate such things as handwriting, computer printouts, commercial printing, paper, and ink. This can even include threatening ransom or suicide notes, and all of this is an attempt to determine the document's author. So first, let's talk about handwriting analysis. So in the 1930s, handwriting analysis played a role in the famous Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. It's a pretty interesting case if you want to look more about it, but this is the case that brought handwriting analysis to kind of the national attention. However, it wasn't until 1999 that the U.S. Court of Appeals determined that handwriting analysis qualified as a form of expert testimony. This is why we are able to use it in court as evidence. To be admissible in court, however, scientifically accepted guidelines must be followed. It is not just some person saying that the handwriting samples look the same. There is a science to it. Handwriting analysis has been used by Scotland Yard, the FBI, and the Secret Service. So even large-scale organizations use handwriting analysis in order to determine the author of a document. Now, there are many unique characteristics to each individual's handwriting. Every person has individual handwriting to them and only them. No two handwriting samples are the same. However, there are 12 major characteristics that have been identified as common things to look for when it comes to analyzing a handwriting sample. So first we have line quality, and this is do the letters kind of flow with each other, or are they sort of erratic and shaky? Our next major trait is spacing. The letters are equally spaced, or are they crowded? So are some letters closer together while some are farther apart, or are they nice and equal? Size consistency. The ratio of height to width is consistent or inconsistent. Are all the letters roughly kind of the same size, or do they vary from one another? Continuous. The writing is continuous, or the writer lifts the pen. This is not the same as cursive versus print. Some people print really without lifting their pen, and some people lift their pen quite frequently for cursive, so this is different than that. Connecting letters, also still different than cursive versus print. Capital and lowercase letters are connected and continuous, or not connected and continuous, and this might vary. There might be some letters that somebody always connects versus other letters they never connect. And letter incomplete, the letter begins and ends on the page, or part of the letter is missing. Some people do not draw letters completely. They might leave a gap in an A or not make their H's as tall as they should, so they look kind of like N's. That would be a part of the letter missing versus doing all of the letters accurately and correctly. The other 6 of the 12 major traits are cursive versus print, told you that was coming, or the letters cursive, printed, or kind of a mixture of both. A lot of people, at least in my age or older groups, kind of do a hybrid of cursive versus print, where they do cursive for some letters but print for others. Pen pressure is pressure equal or not when applied upward and downward strokes. It is very easy to feel pen pressure when you feel the back side of a piece of paper, and sometimes you'll notice that only certain letters show pen pressure, or only downward marks show pen pressure, indicating that that person puts more pressure on those marks. Slant. Is there a slant? Is it left, right, or variable? So are letters straight up and down, or are they angling to the left or the right? Line habits. Text is on, below, or above the line. Now, a lot of people, if they're writing on lined paper, do manage to write on the line, but this is particularly prominent if we're using unlined paper. A lot of people's handwriting does not remain consistently on a line. It does start to vary. Fancy curls or loops. Are there or are there not fancy curls? And placement of crosses on T's and dots on I's. Are they correct or misplaced? So we know that a lowercase I is supposed to have a dot right above it, and a lowercase t is supposed to have the cross kind of in the middle, while the upper middle rather, while an uppercase T is supposed to have the cross at the very top. However, sometimes people make their T's look more like plus signs where it is sort of in the middle, or their uppercase T doesn't have it all the way up at the top like they're supposed to. Sometimes the I is dotted a little to the left or a little to the right, so that's what this is talking about. Now, once again, there are many more than just 12 characteristics, but these are the major characteristics that can be looked for within a handwriting sample. Now, when it comes to a handwriting examination, two writings are the product of one person if their similarities are unique and there are no unexplainable differences are found. So by similarities are unique, we mean that the things that we find in common between these two samples are outside what the normal conventions of writing are. Someone having absolutely perfect, just like you learned in elementary school, handwriting is not what we're talking about. We're talking about little unique features that someone does that makes their writing different. However, we would not expect two writing samples to be identical to each other. No unexplainable differences are found means that there can be differences. We just can explain them by saying like, oh, this is lined paper versus unlined paper. Oh, this person was probably in a hurry versus not in a hurry. We can explain any differences. Two writing samples are never going to be identical. And in fact, if they are, that tells us they were likely copied. So in order to make this analysis, an analyst is going to examine the questionable document for detectable traits and record them. So without looking at any sort of comparison, they are just going to look at the document itself, the ransom note, whatever it is, and they're going to identify features that they think are unique. Mainly the weird way they make a T, or how they always connect an N and an S together if they come one right after another. Unique features. Then they're going to obtain some samples of the suspects. We call this an exemplar, vocabulary word for you, and compare the traits found in the questionable document. So they are going to go through that exemplar and see if they can find those same unique characteristics that they found before. Do they always connect that N and that S? Do they always make their T's a little weird? They're going to go look for those characteristics. Now you might be wondering, how do we get an exemplar? We can get an exemplar a couple of ways. The most common way is to just actually get a warrant for that person to collect writing of theirs. Maybe they have a journal, maybe in your case it's schoolwork of things you've submitted, so just get an existing sample. Now, if no existing sample of that person's exists, we can make someone write out a statement. We usually make them write out a pretty long statement that also includes every letter of the alphabet, every number, and also some common letters and numbers together to see those connecting letters that we were talking about before. And we have them write out this sort of long thing to get their handwriting. Now you may be thinking, oh, I just fake my handwriting, but it's actually pretty hard to fake your handwriting for a long letter. Once the exemplar has been compared to the questionable document, the analysis is going to draw conclusions about the authorship of the questionable document based on the comparison. And they are going to say whether they believe that suspect is the author of the document or not. Now, handwriting analysis is still largely being done by people, but there are some technological advances. One of those things is biometric signature pads. Now, this is not like when you sign on the little credit card or an iPad at a store when you use your card. Biometric signature pads are way fancier than that. So this computerized pad learns to recognize how a person signs his or her name based on the speed, pressure, and rhythm of signing. So it's not just about how the signature looks, it's about how the signature feels. And the next time you go to sign your name, I want you to think about the places that you speed up, slow down, maybe even pause. That is likely unique to you and only you, so biometric signature pads are incredibly hard to fake. So forgeries can be recognized by even slight differences. We have also begun to use a computerized analysis of handwriting where computers can make objective comparisons between handwriting samples. This is most commonly being done with signatures, where suspect signatures can be compared with ones in stored databases. But computers are less biased, but they are also only as smart as the information they're given. As far as handwriting in the courtroom, an expert is going to show how the comparisons were made. They're likely going to use blown up pictures showing those unique features that they've highlighted and how those unique features are present on both the exemplar and the question document. Defense attorneys do still get to cross-examine the handwriting expert to essentially try and discredit them. Now, some shortcomings of handwriting analysis is a particular piece of handwriting can be different from its usual style because of a lot of factors. That can include fatigue, stress, the surface someone's writing on, so people's handwriting does not always look identical from time to time. Also, experts can miss details. Now, another big area of this field is forgery. So, forged documents can include things such as checks, employment records, legal agreements, licenses, wills. It's a big area. So, fraudulence is forgery done for material gain, meaning getting money or objects in return. So, like you can see how a will would also fall under the category of fraudulence because chances are you're trying to get money or something in return. Check forgery is one of the most common types of forgery, however. I know you're thinking you might not write checks very often, but businesses use a lot of checks. So check forgery can include ordering another person's checks from a deposit slip, altering a check, so a check says $10 and you make it look like it says $100, intercepting another's check, altering and cashing it. This is why they do warn, particularly around the holidays, to make sure you're checking your mail often so that your checks don't get stolen, or creating a check from scratch. Now, because check forgery is so prevalent, there have been some methods put in place to prevent check forgery. So a lot of checks are printed on chemically sensitive paper that if kind of forgery is attempted, will change color or texture or something. For the average person, when writing a check, use large writing. It requires more ink to make and makes alterations more difficult. So if grandma writes you a $10 check, making sure that she makes that 10 very big and writes out the words $10 very big, so that changing it to 100 would be a lot more difficult. Select checks with high resolution borders, making them difficult to copy. Copy machines often leave things fuzzy, so if you have a check pattern with a high resolution border, that's going to make it more difficult to copy. This is why a lot of businesses have a very crisp edge on their checks. Select check backgrounds with multiple colors. This is also why a lot of businesses have what many people consider ugly checks, but it's because they have a lot of background colors to try and make them difficult to copy. You can embed fibers in checks that glow under different lights, and chemical wash detection systems that change color when the check is altered. So a lot of businesses have implemented these to prevent check forgery, but check forgery can happen to the average person as well. Literary forgery is another area. Letters and other documents written by famous people can be very valuable. We're going to do some more research on this, but people have tried to forge diaries or letters that some famous person has written somebody else. They turn out to be fakes, but both the content and the letter themselves are very valuable, so they do it to try and make money. Now, literary forgery can be a pretty difficult thing because you have to aim to duplicate the original document by using materials similar to those from the original. So if you were trying to say that you have a letter from Abraham Lincoln, you can't print it on a piece of computer paper because we all know that Abraham Lincoln did not have access to computer paper. So you have to use paper that is appropriate for that time period. Paper does change dramatically over time. They can also chemically treat materials to fake that older look. You want inks mixed from substances that would have been used at the time. For example, in Abraham Lincoln's time, inks contained a high quantity of iron, and many of the writings from that time now have an orangish hue to them because the iron has literally rusted in the letters. It's not a crisp black necessarily anymore, as well as using tools and styles that would have been popular at the time. You can't use a pencil when you're pretending that you have a letter written by Benjamin Franklin. So we have to use appropriate materials, whether that's quills versus an ink pen, etc. Now, the last kind of area of document analysis we want to talk about is counterfeiting, and this is another very big area. So counterfeiting is a crime stretching back to ancient times. It is essentially faking things that are worth money. And as long as there have been money, there have been people making counterfeit money. This often includes currency, so money, traveler's checks, which are a special kind of check that people get when they are traveling, hence the name, food stamps, certain bonds, or even postage stamps can all be counterfeited. So let's talk about counterfeit currency, since that is the most common kind of counterfeiting. So in the United States, the Secret Service has worked with electronics and software makers to add features to paper currency that makes forgery extremely difficult. Every so often, it's not super often, but you will notice that we get updated versions of our money, and that's because they've added more security features because it is sort of a cat and mouse game of every time they add new features, Counterfeiters try and get better at faking those features. Now, scanning cannot reproduce most of the security features. That's where the difficulty lies, is simply putting a piece of money on a scanner is not going to get you many of the security features that have been added as computers became more and more common. The first security feature that often surprises students, and this is not true of all countries, but it is true of our country, is the feel of the paper. Regular printer paper contains starch. It is just made from trees. However, our money is made from rag fiber, so it actually contains cotton fibers in it. So our money is more fabric, really, than it actually is paper. This is why if you've ever washed a pair of pants and they had a dollar bill in the pocket, it did not instantly dissolve. Meanwhile, if you had a note in your pocket and washed it, it probably dissolved, because starch dissolves in water, rag fiber does not. And if you've ever been or worked at a business that takes a pen across different bills when you pay with them, what that pen is it's an iodine pen. And it's used to just check the paper. That is all it's checking. So the iodine pen should stay an orange-brown color if it is a real bill, meaning it's made of rag fiber and it doesn't have any starch. Once again, this rag fiber paper is incredibly difficult to get your hands on, which is why it is a feature really only seen in our money. Meanwhile, if that iodine pen turns black, that tells us there is starch in the paper and that it is not authentic currency paper. So that's really our first security feature. And once again, rag fiber paper is heavily guarded to prevent people from counterfeiting. Now, counterfeiting can be harder to detect than you might originally think. On your screen right now, you have a real bill, you have an authentic bill. I want you to take a couple seconds and give both of them a good hard look. And I want you to just mentally note which one you think is the real and which one you think is the fake. And then you can pause the video if you need to, and then come back and see if you are correct. And I'll point out ways you could have probably told. All right, you got your answer? Let's see. This is the real, and that is the fake. Did you get it? Let's point out how you could have gotten it. I think one of the most obvious things is the clarity. You can see on Hamilton's face right here, you actually see these lines. You don't see them in the fake. Same down here, you can see these very crisp details, and they're much more muddled down here. This signature looks a little fuzzy, while this signature is very crisp. This writing is very crisp, this writing is a little fuzzy. So while they were able to successfully duplicate all of the features very well, they lost the clarity slightly in the counterfeiting process, alluding to them being a fake. Now, our money has numerous features aside from the paper that we use to secure our currency. Now, once again, this is only for American money. Different countries have different features that they use to secure their money. While there are many similarities, there are also many differences. You are responsible for knowing these features. So I'm going to go through the features and then also highlight them on an actual bill to show you what I'm talking about. While I'm showing you them on a $10 bill, these are valid for 5, 10s, 20s, 50s, and $100 bills are actually in another series right now where they've made them even fancier. So they have more features than this. All right, so we have that the portrait stands out from the background and appears raised off the paper. There is minute micro printing on the security threads as well as around the portrait. The serial number is evenly spaced and the same color as the Treasury seal. And there is a check letter and quadrant number. So let's take a look at what those look like. So we have Hamilton is raised off the paper. He goes in front of the border there for number 1. We have our number 2. Number 3, we have that serial number evenly spaced and the same color as the Treasury seal. So we can see that they are the same color as each other. And then we have that check letter and quadrant number right down there. All right. Next, we have the Federal Reserve seal has no sharp points. The Treasury seal with clear, sharp sawtooth points. The security thread is evident, consisting of thin embedded vertical line or strip with the denomination of the bill written in it, Federal Reserve number and letter, as well as series. All right. So we see our first seal, perfectly round, different color than our other seal, which is round, but then has all of those sawtooth points on it. You cannot see the security thread that we are pointing to here. However, we can, if you held this up to the light, you would see a bar running right through there, and it would have 10s on it. Then we have number 8 right here, and last we have number 9, our series, right down there. As we change series of bills, that changes as well. And last but not least, we have the check letter and faceplate number at number 10. Watermark appears on the right side of the portrait in the light. When tilted, the number in the lower right corner makes a color shift from copper to green. Clear, distinct background details and lines, and a clear, distinct border edge. So number 10 right here. Number 11. Number 12. So in this picture, it is green, but in the real world, if you look at that number, it does color shift from green to copper. And yes, that ink is highly regulated as well. We can see the background details 13 is pointing to all of these very clear details around there. And then we can see 14, we have that nice border edge where the printing does not actually go all the way to the edge of the paper, but does rather leave that blank space so we can see that crisp edge to the printing. Again, you are responsible for knowing these 14 features and where they are located. So make sure you have noted them in your notes. Now I have a lot of fun things we're going to do in class with handwriting and forgery and all of that stuff. So I'm excited to go on this journey with you.